the presentations of German-Ukrainian Scientific Society. I'm very glad and very happy to be here today. So yes, as Dr. Kopchenko already mentioned, today I will present only part of my big project about Ukrainian diaspora and memory of the Holocaust. Today I will talk about scholars in exile and briefly about Ukrainian diasporic academic institutions. And first of all, I would like to mention that there are not a lot of publications about, as also Dr. Kopchenko mentioned, not a lot of publications about the topic. There is one research, it's this article published in 2016 by Grzegorz Ossoliński-Liebe, and I will not analyze this article here in my presentation, but just the title of the article, Holocaust Amnesia, it describes the position of Grzegorz Ossoliński-Liebe. So he described Ukrainian diaspora as and this diasporic community as people who forgot, who didn't want to talk about the Holocaust. From my perspective, the situation was a bit more complex, actually much complex, of course, and I would like, I used to work in already 14 different archives in Germany, in the USA, in Canada, and I found a lot of information about different entanglements between different Ukrainian diasporic groups, because in diaspora we are talking about big Ukrainian community in several countries. These people had different political views and so on. Second publication, also it's an important publication for me. This is a lecture, actually. It's a lecture presented by John Paul Himka in 2009 in Saskatchewan University in Saskatoon. So-called Mohila lecture. It's a series of annual public lectures. And he described Ukrainians and Jews, and also this text is important for me because he actually highlighted the main problems between two groups in diaspora. So according to Himka, in this lecture he discovered these memoirs and diaries of Ukrainians and Jews in diaspora. And he highlighted that, according to Ukrainian sources, in the period of the Second World War, all Ukrainians helped Jews. Or not all, but most Ukrainians had sympathy to Jews and tried to help them. But according to Jewish sources, Jewish diaries and memoirs, mostly Ukrainians hated Jews and collaborated with Germans, with Nazis. So this is a context of my presentation. We have. I am talking about it to explain the mood in diaspora. So two groups mostly didn't have a lot of contacts, and the memory of Cold War was very, very difficult. Still, I am talking about the third wave of Ukrainian diaspora after Second World War, and so there were approximately 250,000 people. Most of them were from West Ukraine, and after the Second World War, they used to live a couple of years in DP camps in Germany, and then a lot of them moved to North America. But a lot of people tried to continue their life, and also we understand, we see the situation now in this already fifth wave of Ukrainian diaspora. But small group of activists, and I categorize them through Rogers Brubaker, famous scholar, who in his article Diaspora wrote about diaspora as a category of practice, project, claim and stance, rather than as a bounded group. So I'm talking about a couple of hundreds people actually, and who were involved in the discussions, who somehow, like so-called civil or political activists, who organized different events. And among this group, there were a couple of dozens scholars who were involved in the dialogue. So I'm talking about a very small group of people, but still, it's very important to mention that the impact was incredibly high. Well, of course, political views were very important, and actually the first group of immigrants who started the dialogue between Ukrainians and Jews were not scientists, these were political activists. As you know, Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists after Second World War divided into three groups. Had Banderists, Melnikists, and so-called Dvi-Kari, or Ukrainian Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists abroad. So the first group, Ukrainian Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, headed by Andriy Melnik, and they had their own intellectual leaders who were involved in the dialogue between Ukrainians and Jews. And it's not a dialogue, but experts in Jewish topic. So Zinovy Knish from this part of Ukrainian of the organization, and he published a couple of books. For example, Vidmolova, Witch Hunters, and his books were anti-Semitic, to be honest. So I am talking about it to explain that even in this diaspora groups, I would like to talk. It was my task, yes, to find as I understand it, to find the people who wanted who really want to start this dialogue, yes. So Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, Melnikids didn't want to do it as well. Banderists, also Petro Mirchuk, it's very very important intellectual, represented Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists Bandera wing, and he was well-known public intellectual, and he prepared a volume in the ranks of the UPA, a collection of memoirs of former UPA fighters. And in this volume, he created fictional character, Stella Kranzbach. And in this volume, Stella Kranzbach, she wrote about her life that she was saved by UPA. So both groups, Melnikids and Banderists, they had their own tasks, own ideas how to work with the Holocaust memory and with Jewish diaspora in the USA. But they didn't organize any events. They didn't organize any, as far as I know, as far as I see, any conferences and so on. But the third group, Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists abroad, or so-called Dvi-Kari, or double leaders, this organization were directly supported by CIA, and there are a lot of documents from the United States archives. It was in the frame of so-called Operation Aerodynamic, and American side, the United States side, supported public and publication activities by this group of nationalists. For example, they supported newspapers Сучасна Україна, Український самостійник, Українська літературна газета, and also American side, they recommended, I can say that it was order from the United States, but they recommended to this group, because they gave them financial support, they recommended them to in their publications, in their newspapers, somehow act in the frame of unity of the people in the struggle for independence, friendship with all other people, and so on. And actually, this is I'm talking about period of the beginning of 1950s, and actually in Germany, with German government situation was the same. The same recommendations German government got from the United States. For example, when Konrad Adenauer decided to establish diplomatic relations between Western Germany and Israel. Also, American side somehow supported these activities and also connected financial support with these diplomatic activities. So this was the frame of the Cold War, yes. So and we have to understand it. Nevertheless, these newspapers, Сучасна Україна, Українська літературна газета, Український самостійник, even according to the United States archives and CIA officers, were considered by the best diasporic newspapers, even among Poles, Jews, Germans, etc. So these newspapers and journals, they had very high level, and the best Ukrainian scholars, literators, publicists published there, and the impact of these newspapers were very high. So in this frame, the first political activist, member of Organization Ukrainian Nationalists Abroad, за кордоном, Євген Верцьона, he published an article in Сучасна Україна in 1951. So in 1951 we see how this dialogue starts. So dialogue between Ukrainian diasporic groups and Jews. Like the first step was from the Ukrainian side, and in this article, but still in this article he wrote, we are ready to work together with Jews, but only if they understand the necessity of Ukraine's independence, and if they understand the necessity of Ukraine's independence, and will not support Russian imperialists. So it was difficult for nationalists to start, but somehow they tried to do it. In the mid of 1950s, Богдан Кордюк, this also very important member of this part of OUN, he used to live in Munich in Germany, and he was very active in this dialogue. So I'm talking about dialogue because later also I will describe Jewish activities in this field. So Bogdan Kordyuk, he used to live in Munich, but quite often he was in Canada, in the United States. He visited different Ukrainian diasporic centers, and he conducted public lectures, and some of his lectures were about Ukrainian-Jewish relations and about the Second World War. So it's not scientific activities, but still it's public lectures. There were some audience, people came to visit, to listen to him, and in the diasporic newspapers, it's a lot of information about his visits. He was in Australia also, not just in the United States and Canada, and he's important. And also he later in 1960s, when in Ukraine was published anti-Semitic book by Трохим Кичко, Judaism без прикрас, he wrote review on the book, and he was actually very angry about this book, and he wrote that the Soviet Union wanted to show all Ukrainians as anti-Semites, and he was very angry, and he always tried to somehow to show the connections between Ukrainians and Jews, and somehow to organize these relations between two groups in diaspora. Now it's a very important organization, Ukrainian Free Academy of Sciences, Українська вільна академія наук. So Ukrainian nationalists in this group of the organization started this dialogue at the beginning of the 1950s, and Ukrainian scientists, they started or continued this dialogue in the second half of the 1950s. In New York, Ukrainian Free Academy of Sciences or Ukrainian Liberal Academy of Art and Science, they organized academic commission for the study of history of the Ukrainian Jewish relations. This was a very important commission, and actually, I used to work in the Kyiv of Ukrainian Free Academy of Sciences, and this is, as you see, a draft of the list of members of the commission, and this like very important names for Ukrainians, it's very important scientists in 20th century. For example, Levko Chikolenko, Smerstotsky, Globlin, Lysak Rudnitsky, Kadrin Rudnitsky, his uncle. So a lot of the best Ukrainian scientists in the diaspora, they were involved in the commission, and they were interested in the activities of this commission. There are 29 people, but here I found another list, 34 names of people, but also very important to mention that this Ukrainian Jewish Commission and also some members of the commission were Jews, also very, very important scientists, Solomon Holdeman, for example, Mendel Shirovich, I will talk about him a bit later. So, and also Margolina Hansen, she was the daughter of Arnold Margolin. So, very prominent figures in diaspora. Partly they were connected, of course, to Eastern Europe, to Ukraine, but they were Jews, and also they participated in the commission. And unfortunately, this commission didn't have a lot of activities. The best, actually, the prominent activities was publication of journal. So Arnold Margolin, very important politician in diaspora. He, as you probably know, he was very active in Ukraine in the period of 1917-1921, period of Ukrainian Revolution. Then he used to live in the United States, and he passed away in 1956. And members of the commission and the head of the Ukrainian Free Academy of Sciences, Mikhail Vetukhiev, they decided to somehow commemorate his Arnold Margolin, and they decided to publish collective volume in commemoration of Arnold Margolin. And Vetukhiev wrote letters to Solomon Holdeman, Philip Friedman, Alfred Bernstein, Alexis Holdenweiser, so for Jewish scientists who used to live in the United States, but also in the Western Europe, and he invited him to give their papers, to write some texts. And finally, so Margolin passed away in 1956, and the volume was published in 1959, and there are a lot of like very funny documents in the Kyiv when Vetukhiev wrote reminders for the colleagues, because mostly all of them didn't send the articles before deadlines, and so the volume was published, they planned to publish it in 1957, but it was published in 1959. And you see here the names of the people who sent their papers: Philip Friedman, Levko Chikolenko, and many others. I don't want to read all these names, but this was important publication. Also here you can see the contents of this volume. And actually, and maybe unfortunately, it was only one big volume prepared by the Commission and by the Ukrainian Free Academy of Sciences. Later, this organization didn't recognize any big prominent events dedicated to Ukrainian and Jewish relations. Unfortunately, I don't know why. Maybe because of the generations, because this generation was a bit more they were representatives of the second wave of immigration. But still, unfortunately, this organization, Ukrainian Free Academy of Sciences, didn't organize any other activities, but they had a lot of plans, actually. I found this very interesting document in the Kyiv. For example, they wanted to organize 7 conferences dedicated to Ukrainian and Jewish relations. And about Khmelnytsky period, Mazapa period, 18th century, 19th century, Soviet time, and so on. But still, wonderful plans and wonderful ideas, but still they didn't organize it. One of the members of the commission was Josef Lichten, and he is very, very important for me, for my research, for my project. He was friend of Arnold Margolin, and also he participated in this volume. He sent his paper, but as I see, as I understand, because of this not high activity of the commission, he started to work together with Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists Abroad, this part of UVAN, and actually, in this way, in this frame, as I see it, it works. Josef Lichten, he in 1960s, he had a lot of contacts among Ukrainian diaspora with different Ukrainians, and later I will talk about their activities. Unfortunately, in 1970s, unfortunately for Ukrainians, for us, in 1970s and 1980s, he started to work more with Polish diaspora. He's from Poland. He was born in Trevo before the First World War in Vilnius, in Russian Empire, but then used to live in Trevo, Poland, and his original name is Józef Lichtenstuhl. Then he used to live in New York and worked also as a scientist in Vatican, and he had a lot of contacts with Polish diaspora. But in the 1960s, he used to work together with Ivan Stachiev, also very, very, very important activist for me, political activist, civil activist. He was member of this part of UVAN, and together with Lichten, they organized 3 conferences in New York, and these conferences were wonderful events, absolutely wonderful. I can read the short description of the conference which was published, the description in Suchastность. So more than 150 people from both communities, Ukrainian and Jewish, were present. It should be emphasized that this was the first time in 20 years that such a large number of Jewish scholars, publicists, journalists, and public figures appeared at a meeting of this kind. Over these 2 decades, they also had either participated personally or been connected with Ukrainian Jewish gatherings, and therefore can speak on the basis of personal experience about the exceptional character of the event. So Josef Lichten, as I already mentioned, he used to work together with Ukrainian Free Academy of Sciences, and for him, this event that he organized together with Stachiev was exceptional, and indeed it was. Later, they also, and it's very important for me to mention that somehow to divide. Yes, so Ivan Stachiev, he represents a political organization, but still they tried, as I see, they tried to organize the conferences in as scientific way as possible. Yeah, so they invited a lot of other people. For example, Всеволод Holubnichi, he wasn't a member of UVAN. He actually supported, he had socialist ideas, and Всеволод Holubnichi, he actually was, he wasn't a historian, but he was a Ukrainian scientist abroad in diaspora, and he also had public lectures about Ukrainian Jewish relations, and in in 1961, he published a paper. Actually, he conducted a lecture and then published the paper, "The Place and Role of Jews in the Society of Soviet Ukraine Before the Second World War." And in this paper, he suggested this motto, "До порозуміння через зрозуміння." And I found this motto absolutely wonderful, and it explains actually the mood in the Ukrainian diaspora. It explains how they wanted to find this. It's like this word cherished through. It's a very scientific word, because they tried somehow to organize this dialogue, to hear each other, to hear the positions of each other. And they, together with Golubnichi, Stachiev and Lichten, they organized Ukrainian Jewish Committee. The members of this committee were Yaroslav Bilinsky, Всеволод Golubnichi, Ivan Kedrin, Ivan Lysak-Rudnitsky, Valentin Novitsky, Yaroslav Pelensky, Ivan Stachiev, Levko Chikolenko, and Yuri Shevelyov. And from the Jewish side, they invited Alfred Bernstein, Ada Friedman, Felix Gross, Abraham Kin, Josef Lichten, and Nathan Reich. So this kind of small committee, yes, more than 10 people, but they organized these wonderful events. The first conference was in 1961, the second in 1962, and the third in 1964. And here I found the program of the third conference. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to find the programs of the first and the second. I read the description of the conferences, but I found program for only the third conference. And also here you see the sponsors, organization committee, the sponsors of the conference, and mostly these people who were this Jewish-Ukrainian committee. And also very important for me, I was actually very glad to find names of Lysak-Rudnitsky, Yuri Shevelyov in the list. So important Ukrainian scholars who wanted and who actually participated in these events. In between the second and the third conference, also this committee organized lecture, kind of discussion between David Kremen and Petro Petichny. Petro Petichny later in 1980s, I will talk about him more, because in 1980s he also organized Ukrainian Jewish Conference. In 1960s, he participated in these lectures. In the frame of these lectures, the Committee of Jewish-Ukrainian Relations organized these lectures, and these events were in New York. And also you can see these names: Alfred Bernstein, Josef Lichten. So they tried to invite also Jews. They tried to somehow equally present both sides, yes, Jews and Ukrainians. Later, in 1966, was Ukrainians and Jews, a symposium, and its next publication. So unfortunately, after these three conferences, the third conference was last one, and after this event, I can see only separate events. One of these events, this publication, is Symposium of Ukrainians and Jews, and the text for the symposium wrote Matthew Stachiev, Matvey Stachiev, Lev Shankovsky, Roman Smolstotsky, Lev Dobransky. So these people also, they were somehow connected to this Ukrainian Free Academy of Sciences, but this book, this volume, it was not part of activities of Ukrainian Free Academy of Sciences. It actually, here is information that it's published by the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. But again, only one volume, and that's it actually. But still, we have these activities, and also we see Leo Hyman, only one Jewish name in the contents, but still. Some Ukrainian scholars participated, of course, in different conferences, different activities. They conducted public lectures, and it's very difficult to find this events. But it's explained actually how this network between Ukrainian and Jewish scientists. So, for example, IVO, it's a very important institute for Jewish research, very well known institution in New York. And for example, they had their own annual conference, and here, February 17, Tuesday, comments George Zhuravlov, or Yuri Shevelyov. So they invited him to participate in the conference. They for them he was a well-known expert in the field, and of course he was well-known scientist, and so for them was very important to invite him, and he participated in these activities. And it also shows us how this networks worked. From Jewish side also, I used to talk about Josef Lichten. The second important person for me for my research is Mendel Shurovich, and he organized. He's civil activist used to live in New York and the United States, and he organized association to perpetuate the memory of the Ukrainian Jews. And he also was very active in diaspora. He had a lot of contacts with Ukrainians, with different groups in Ukrainian diaspora. In different Ukrainian newspapers, he published his articles, and when he passed away in 1965, a lot of Ukrainian newspapers wrote about him, about his life, about his willing to work together with Ukrainians. And for example, here in his archive, it's Mendel Shurovich papers, in the IVO archives and library, I found a letter from Nikifor Grigoriev. In 1950s, he was a director of Voice of America, Ukrainian language service, very well-known and important Ukrainian diasporic person from Ukrainian diaspora, and he wrote personal letter to Mendel Shurovich, and in this letter he wrote, for example, that in my childhood I used to live together with with Jewish kids, and so on, and he suggested some financial support to the organization headed by Mendel Shurovich. Unfortunately, I didn't find the exact amount, but the fact is, for me, it's very important. The fact that Ukrainians supported this organization, they gave their money to the organization, to this association, and also this association had their own ideas. They wanted actually to somehow to switch to more scientific work, and not only public. And they had wonderful idea to prepare 3 books of Jewish life in Ukraine. And here it's proposed table of contents, and later also I found information about the approximate amount. They calculated that they need about $200,000 United States dollars to prepare these 3 books, and it was too much for this organization. And as I understand, they didn't manage to find financial support to publish these books. But still, we see these ideas. Sometimes it works, sometimes no. But still, we see the ideas, and it's very important for me to see how this networks worked, how they transferred these ideas, because also the same ideas had Philip Friedman, who was member of Ukrainian Jewish Commission. He was member of Ukrainian Free Academy of Sciences and Ukrainian Jewish Commission in the Academy of Sciences. And also he had an idea to organize conferences and publish books. And also it didn't work, but still. In 1980s, collective volume was published, Ukrainian during World War II, History and its Aftermath, edited by Yuri Boshek. And a lot of Ukrainian scientists, the second new generation who was active in the 1980s, they sent their papers to this volume. Орест Subtelny, Bogdan Kravchenko, Taras Gonchak. Taras Gonchak, for example, he wrote an article about Ukrainian and Jewish relations in the Second World War, and this article was published in this volume. Also Roman Serban, Miron Kurupas. The second important event, and actually I think one of the biggest, or even the biggest conference on Ukrainian Jewish relations in diaspora in the period of the Cold War, was organized in Canada, in Ontario, in October 1983, and at McMaster University, and the organizers were Petro Potichny, who, as you probably remember, who participated in these activities in New York in the 1960s. So in the 1980s, he was professor in Canada, and he was still in the topic. Yes, and together with Howard Astor, Jewish scientist, Canadian scientist who had Jewish origin, he decided to organize this conference, and there were 23 papers, so 23 scholars participated in the conference, and later the conference was reworked in these collective volumes, and from the left side, this Kozak Mamai, it's the third edition, and in the pink one is the second edition, published in 1988. Actually, here is the contents of this volumes, actually, and you can see the names of people who participated in the conference: Omelian Pritsak, Yaroslav Palensky, Frank Sisson, and so on. So again, the best Ukrainian scholars, historians those times. But still, again, I see this from Jewish side. The unofficial head of Jewish delegation of Jewish team at the conference was Shmuel Ettinger. He came from Israel. And I found information, some small text in one of newspapers about his reflections on the conference, and he was like for Ukrainian side, big success, great success, wonderful conference. But for Shmuel Ettinger, he wrote that he was a bit disappointed because Ukrainians didn't want to talk about the Holocaust, about the perpetrators, collaboration with Nazis. So they and actually it describes the whole period of the Cold War. So a lot of wonderful events and a lot of activities, steps from Ukrainian side, and somehow until the end of 1980s. A lot of scholars tried to talk about Petlura, about Khmelnytsky, but not about Holocaust. The topic was very, very sensitive, but for Jewish side, it was if you don't want to talk about Holocaust, we can organize a discussion. Yes, even Josef Lichten. Yes, in the 1960s, he tried to work together with Ukrainians, but later. And from my point of view, as I see from the sources, the problem was that Ukrainians didn't want to reflect on the Holocaust. Now, very, very briefly, I think I don't have a lot of time. Very briefly, I will describe the situation in Europe, because I used to talk about North America. In Europe, I think one of the biggest Ukrainian scientific organization, it's NTSHA, so Shevchenko Scientific Society in Europe, in Sarcelles, near Paris, and the head of the organization was Vladimir Kubiyovich, and he prepared Encyclopedia of Ukraine, very well-known initiative by him and his team, and I tried to read a couple of articles in the encyclopedia, and this project started in 1950s, but then later they added some articles in the 80s, and now we have online encyclopedia, and still people can write some articles there. So the first articles in 1950s and tried to find some information about the Jews, about the Holocaust. For example, in the 1950s, he wrote that Ukrainian population, with the exception of a few individuals, did not take part in this extermination of people. And it's very yes, and I have to mention that Vladimir Kubyevich, he was the head of Ukrainian government under Nazi occupation in Western Ukraine. So, and also he helped Germans to organize SS Galicia division. So he was there in the period of the Second World War. But in his text in the encyclopedia, he wrote that Ukrainian population did not take part. In 1980s, again the same information, and only some organized auxiliary units took part in the Holocaust, but not individuals. Bogdan Witwitsky also he contributed to the encyclopedia and the article about anti-Semitism. Again, he wrote in the 1980s that a small number of individual Ukrainians collaborated with the Nazis, and he mentioned 11,000 people. 11,000 people who Ukrainian auxiliary police. But in 2008, Dietrich Pohl, who wrote an article about the Holocaust to this encyclopedia, now it's online encyclopedia, and Dietrich Pohl wrote about 120,000 members of the Ukrainian auxiliary police, and many of them participated in Holocaust. So, for me, it's very important to mention that Vladimir Kubyevich, who was there at the period, who was an eyewitness, who was head of Ukrainian government, he tried to hide the information in the encyclopedia. He tried to somehow to write another picture. I think I can actually very briefly maybe again back to the United States. Kolleg Lisiuk, it's not his activity is not dedicated to science. He wasn't a scientist. He had his own publishing house, Wake Up America, and he published a lot of anti-Semitic books in English, in Ukrainian, and in Russian language. And here actually is a list of his books, and one of these books was, for example, Ukrainian and Jewish by Andrei Ditkovsky. So he's a very interesting person, and he actively participated in public activities, and also he sent his articles to Ukrainian newspapers, and he tried to discuss at the pages of Ukrainian newspapers to discuss Ukrainian Jewish relations with Ukrainian scholars, and he tried to emphasize that we don't need to organize this dialogue because Jews are very bad people and so on. So he is important because he had his, as I mentioned, he had his own publishing house and published a lot of books. Yakov Suslinsky also I think I will he will be my last representative of this Jewish side of the dialogue. So he was a Ukrainian Jewish dissident who in 1970s he managed to leave Soviet Union, and he used to live in Israel, and he was very active. In 1991 in Israel he organized public committee for Jewish-Ukrainian cooperation, And this committee in 1991 became the Society of Jewish-Ukrainian Relations. And also he participated in different conferences. He presented his society. He had a lot of contacts in North America. He was in North America a lot of times, and Ukrainian newspapers also published a lot about him, about his society. And they had wonderful, absolutely wonderful journal dialogues, dialogue. This journal, from the left side, you can see the first issue. So it was not it wasn't very fancy, but next ones are better. But nevertheless, wonderful journal with a lot of wonderful texts. This was bilingual journal, Ukrainian and Russian. A lot of Ukrainians and published there in Ukrainian dissidents, for example, Stanislav Kravansky and so on, published their texts in Ukrainian, but some Jewish intellectuals published their text in Russian language. But still, also very, very important journal, very important texts. In 1990s, so my period, it's about mostly about Cold War, the Cold War. But I would like to very, very briefly mention beginning of the 1990s and Ivan Stachiev, because as you remember, in the 1960s he organizes conferences, and still he was for me it's also was very important to understand how active he was in diaspora community. So Ivan Stachiev in 1990s organized Society of Ukrainian-Jewish Relations in New York, because there was documentary film screening on CBS channel. It called 60 Minutes, and it's a documentary film about Ukrainians and about the Second World War. And in this film, Ukrainians were blamed as anti-Semites, and Stachiev decided to respond somehow, and he organized a society. And Rabbi David Lincoln from the Park Avenue Synagogue in New York, he supported Ivan Stachiev and his society. They organized public rallies against this CBS channel, against this movie, and so on. Yes, so I will stop here. Thank you for your attention. For my project, it's very important, and I would like to mention that I'm talking about couple of dozens people, scientists, but still they managed in the frame of the Cold War, in the context of this hardness between these two groups of people, they managed to organize a lot of wonderful activities, published a lot of texts, and maybe only now we can somehow understand the impact of the role of these people. Okay, thank you for your attention. I will stop here. Thank you.